For the first time in Canada's history, we're one step closer to giving captive whales a real home in the ocean. Nova Scotia, the province of Nova Scotia, has just approved the lease to the country's first whale sanctuary, a refuge that could finally let former captive whales live in the sea again, or if they were born in captivity for the first time ever. But is this the finish line, or is it just the beginning of a long journey? We're going to talk about that on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you could speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about how the Whale Seaside Sanctuary, the Whale Sanctuary Project, finally got approval for a lease in Nova Scotia. This is huge. We never thought this was actually going to happen. It's been a long time. I think it's been over 10 years that the Whale Sanctuary Project has been alive. I remember having Lori Marino from the Whale Sanctuary Project on the podcast to talk about it. Also, I'll link it to the show notes. This is something that's been a huge news. And it's all sort of stemming from, I think, from Marineland. It just seems to be a big coincidence right now. There are 30 belugas in Marineland right now that need to go somewhere. The Marineland wants to sell them off to other theme parks in China, but the government stopped that from happening. They needed a permit. The government said, no, you're not going to be putting it into another park where they're allowed to be part of the entertainment as well as breeding. That's a law in Canada. You're not allowed to do, so why would we send it to another country? Perfectly understandable. That's what's happened. And now we have these 30 belugas. They're sitting there. It just reminds me of Marineland. Me as a kid going to Marineland, listening to the jingle, Everybody Loves Marineland. It's a song that just kept happening over and over and over in the 80s and 90s. And when I was finally in university, I hadn't really learned about the problems of captivity yet. And I took my girlfriend, who's now my wife, I took my girlfriend to Marineland. It's like, let's go see the whales. We're in Ontario. It's really the only time where we can go see whales. And I remember being on a show, we were super excited to see these whales perform tricks and seeing what they do, how intelligent they are, how magnificent they are in person. And these dolphins came out of where they were stationed, and they came out of this gate. And one animal kind of came out a little too early, one of the dolphins, and looked like he got caught in the gate a little bit. He kept swimming into the pool where they were, the main pool where they were doing all the tricks, and you saw a trickle of blood coming from his blowhole. That trickle of blood increased and increased throughout the show. People in the show, in the crowd, were like, hey, you need to stop this dolphin. It's bleeding. It's bleeding. It's bleeding. And people were saying, look, we know it's bleeding. We got people looking after it because they were looking after it, but it kept doing the tricks anyway, even after being looked at, including being bloody, all the things. People were freaking out, and they were trying to say that this dolphin wants to do the trick so bad, it doesn't care that it's bloody. That's the stuff that they were giving the audience, the information that was giving the audience. Long time after that, there was this guy who was a trainer who actually worked at Marineland. He defected, seeing all the stuff that was happening to the animals. He was the walrus trainer, and he saw what was happening to the walrus. He saw what was happening to the orcas. He saw what was happening to the bottlenose dolphins and the belugas, and he was like, these people at Marineland are not paying enough to take care of these animals. Fast forward to today's day, and we're starting to see these belugas, which basically the Marineland is shut down now. We're starting to see these belugas, 30 of them, that are in really bad water quality, really bad shape. There used to be 52. 20 have died actually in the past since 2019, all because they're failing to take care of these animals. When they try to transfer the animals to Mystique Aquarium down in Connecticut, the animals died when they went down there. Obviously, not a good situation for the whales, not a good sign for Marineland, and so things just happen. In 2021, we saw a law go in to protect these marine mammals, make sure they're not doing shows, they're not part of the entertainment, and they're not being used for bread, because that's another big moneymaker. Marineland tried to transfer these animals out and try to get paid for that transfer to go to another marine theme park in China. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've heard from scientists, from advocates, and from both who are saying the worst thing that people could do at Marineland is transfer them out of North America and to Asia, where the animal welfare protections are not very good. That's essentially what I'm going to say. Right? And so now we have these animals that are kind of stuck there. The Marineland asked for a permit to send them to China. The government said, no, you can't do that. Okay, now what? They're saying, we can't feed them. We're going to have to euthanize them. The government said, absolutely not. You're wrong for even saying that. You need to take care of them because you're the ones who have them housed. And that's been going back and forth ever since. There's been a little bit of fundraising. I've done this all in another couple of episodes. But during this entire thing, during this entire fiasco, the name of the Whale Sanctuary project came up a number of times because people are wondering, where can we put these animals? If we can't keep them in captivity, if we can't ship them off to another marine theme park, where could they go? Two places were suggested. There was up in the Arctic where there are beluga whales in the wild. They would put them there. That hasn't really manifested into anything. The indigenous people who are up there, who are part of the commission, haven't come back with an answer as far as I know. And so there's no real will at this point to do that. Somebody suggested and rumors kind of flew around, but it just still hasn't happened. The other place was the Whale Sanctuary project, which is supposed to be in Nova Scotia. Now, this Whale Sanctuary project is and has been around for about a decade. Now, nothing has really come of it other than they have found a location in Nova Scotia where the organizers and the funders and the donors and everything feel that there could be a spot in Nova Scotia where they actually found the location would be perfect to house orcas or maybe a couple of dolphins or maybe a couple of belugas, depending on the situation. So a lot of people are like, oh, great, let's put the 30 belugas over there. That's not happening. This sanctuary would be a pen. So essentially it would be a net, but it would be in natural ocean waters in the ocean in the North Atlantic. There's a lot of problems with it in terms of the location because these belugas do not come from Nova Scotia. They don't belong in Nova Scotia. A lot of them have Russian ancestry of where their ancestors were located. A lot of these animals were fed and bred in and born in captivity. So would they be able to survive on their own? There's a lot of misinformation around the sanctuary. When I did the interview, Lori would say, and I've also interviewed other scientists about that, and they have said that, look, there's no expectation that these animals are going to survive on their own. There's no expectation that these animals will survive for a long time. There hasn't been a precedent that's really been set. There have been some beluga whales that have been released into a sanctuary, but they stay inside, but they have a choice of going outside. There was Keiko, the orca, that was put in Iceland in a pen. He survived for about 5 or 6 years, and he finally went out of his pen. He was allowed to leave every once in a while. He finally left. He went on his own, and he eventually passed away peacefully, but he was almost 30 years old, and also traumatized. A lot of these animals are traumatized. So there hasn't been a lot of precedent, but people are saying that these animals can't be put out because of these two things. They're also saying that the Whale Sanctuary, where it's located in Nova Scotia along the Atlantic coast, is not good water quality-wise. Well, there used to be a gold mine back in the early 1920s, and so people were like, well, there's going to be gold and there's going to be all these different types of metals that come around with mining. They've done tests, they've done the environmental assessments, everything seems to be written off and checked out, everything seems to be fine, signed, delivered, sealed, delivered. We've been fine with that. They just didn't have the permits. The sanctuary did not have the permits. They did not have the provincial permits. They did not have the federal permits, which is like navigable waters, because they're going to be putting in a pen, like a net, a massive net. And they didn't have the landowners around there, their agreement. They have to have unanimous agreement. There's rumors that 2 or 3 of them have said okay, but the other 2 haven't. There's a lot of traffic that's going to come in. A lot of people are going to visit this bay. And it's a small area, like a small town area where they don't want a lot of visitors. A lot of people just want to be peaceful. And a lot of them are retired, or they're just growing up with young families there. They don't want the big traffic that's there. It's the bay that they live in. They may not want whales in there that are not supposed to be there on a natural basis. Who knows what that's going to do to the ecosystem and environment? There are still a lot of questions. I actually think the Whale Sanctuary is a great idea. It's something that we need to do as an experiment for these whales. And I know when I say experiment, I don't mean to play with whales' lives, but it's something that we need to do. We owe these whales some kind of sanctuary after being bottled up into these tanks for their entire lives. They need to do something. And you can't fit 30 belugas in there. These 30 belugas probably won't be able to be in there because they don't have the permits until today. They have been announced. It has been announced that Nova Scotia has provided the permits for the lease for the area around the Crown land that's around the bay. They will have access to it. So that's one of 3 major things that need to happen. Of course, they still have to have federal, so DFO, Fisheries and Oceans, needs to sign off on it and give them the permits to actually handle the whales and take care of those whales, as well as Transport Canada, which is like navigable waters. They need to make sure that boats can go in and out, that these nets are going to be fine. We've had this net stuff happen before in other sanctuaries, so I'm sure we can come to an agreement. But the fact is, they do have a permit from the province of Nova Scotia, which is one of the big hurdles that they had to get over. And this is a huge thing. This is something that I feel as though we are getting closer and closer to having something that will work, to having something that is closer to a physical thing. And now I know there's a lot of people who are putting comments on my TikTok and social media and stuff like that do not agree with this and say, look, this has been planning for 10 years. This is not going to happen. They don't have the funding. They don't have the people to care for it. They don't have this. They don't have that. I understand. I completely understand. This is something completely new. It's not going to happen overnight. We need to be patient with these things. And of course, as we are patient, as we are waiting for other permits and for landowners to say, hey, you know what, we're okay with it finally, hopefully that will happen because I understand their predicament. There's going to be dolphins and orcas and belugas that die that may have been able to go into this sanctuary if it was actually put in place, but it isn't. And it's not going to be done for a long time. Even if we get all the permits and landowners' permission tomorrow, it's still going to take a while to put everything in place. But I guarantee you, this Whale Sanctuary Project organization knows what they're doing because they have the backs of scientists. They have the support of veterinarians. They have the support of advocates. They have the support of marine biologists. They have the support of local environmentalists. There are a lot of people who will support us just as much probably as people who won't support this. This is very new and is very experimental. We do not know if some of these orcas will last. They probably won't be able to feed on their own ever, or it'll take a long time. That we know. These animals have been psychologically battered for a long time, especially with orcas. We know of their emotional awareness. We know that they're sensitive. We know that they've gone through a huge traumatic event for their entire lives, where some of them still were captured. Some of them were born in a tank and they have never seen the ocean. So we know that there's a lot of questions that need to be had, but we also owe it to these marine mammals, these poor marine mammals who have been the subject of entertainment, of breeding when they don't necessarily want to, and artificial insemination and so forth. And it's just been horrible for them. We know this. And so it's up to us as human species to give them a chance. And I understand why a lot of people are against this. I completely get it, but we owe it. We need to help these animals out. And it may not be perfect, but we owe them something. And there are some people who believe that these animals could even die in these pens at some point, maybe even directly. And that is something that we might see. But if we can get this right at some point, we can provide these animals with the sanctuary that they need. Now, not all the animals can fit in this sanctuary. There are a lot of questions. I get it. But this is something that we're getting close to, and it's probably going to happen at some point. We just don't know when. So I would love to hear your thoughts, whether you're for or against it. No judgment. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to your favorite podcast app, or you're watching this on your favorite social media app, I'd love to hear your comments as well. Or you can go to speakupforblue.com/contact, and you can just fill out the form. You can email me, or you can even go to Instagram, DM me at How to Protect the Ocean. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, from the True North Strong and Free and home to eventual Whale Sanctuary Project, Seaside Sanctuary. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon, and happy conservation.